Hey, welcome in everybody to the debut episode of Stone Cold Stros. Justin Verlander, no longer an Astro. We're going to talk about it here on Stone Cold Stros inaugural episode with Charlie Palooza, Josh Jordan. Let's get into it.
The Houston Astros, world champions!
Welcome in everybody to episode 1 of Stone Cold Stros. I am Brandon Strange. I'm joined today by sportsmap.com editor Josh Jordan, senior contributor Charlie Palillo. Charlie, Josh, welcome in, guys. The baseball gods have blessed us with news on our inaugural episode. Charlie, I'm going to go right to you because I know Josh is just as anxious to get your feedback on this news. What do you think from an Astros perspective this means Justin Verlander signs with the Mets?
I would say probably the expected outcome. He goes to the National League for openers. That's not a bad thing. And if you're thinking, well, he wasn't typically good in the World Series, if we get an Astros-Mets World Series in 2023, the Astros will get their licks at Justin Verlander then. They'll also play the Mets in June for your planning purposes, right? Full-blown interleague play. Every team plays every other team. The Astros and Mets play at Minute Maid Park in June. That should be an interesting night. And Verlander better be pitching one of those 3 games for the Mets. In the end, did Justin Verlander figure, look, I love my time in Houston. So much for any idea of a Hall of Fame cap being a Houston Astros cap when Verlander goes into the Hall of Fame with this. And he goes out on top. He finally had a World Series victory. The Astros can maintain, of course, and maybe become the first back-to-back World Series champion since the late 90s. Or he just goes on, takes the richest offer. Daddy Warbucks with the Mets. Don't begrudge Steve Cohen being rich enough to be able to buy and sell Jim Crane and most of the other owners. So 2 years, $86.66666 million. Identical per annual value to that of Max Scherzer, his former and again teammate. A vesting option, which makes sense, that could bring a 3rd year, taking the deal to $130 million. We'll see whether Justin Verlander, or Jim Crane for that matter, chooses to disclose whether the Astros had a chance to match, and do you factor in personal income tax? You know, the agent doesn't care about personal income tax. His percentage is his percentage off the top. So Verlander equals Scherzer, the highest average annual player value, $43.33 million in Major League history. 2 guaranteed years. He turns 40 in February. The Astros, of course, have pitching depth. They will miss Verlander, right? Are all their young studs and growing studs going to stay healthy and maximize their potential? That they all do it? Probably not. So it's a blow to the Astros, but you know what? They would have won the division and who knows, maybe won the World Series if Verlander never threw a pitch for them in 2022. They did go to the World Series with him not throwing a pitch in 2021. So the Astros will soldier on. Congratulations to the Mets. Congratulations to the Verlanders.
Josh, you are superstitious like I am. The Astros did not win a World Series until Justin Verlander signed with the Astros, or that Justin Verlander was traded for the Luhnow traded for Justin Verlander to bring him to Houston. Any sentimental value from a luck standpoint? Is any feeling in that standpoint? I feel like good for him going grabbing that bag, but any feelings from just bittersweet standpoint that this is the end of an era for JV in Houston?
Yeah, I don't know if Verlander's necessarily their lucky charm, if that's kind of what you're getting at from the superstitious angle. But man, he was a hell of a pitcher. When he was healthy, he was fantastic. I think what I will miss is I remember, a couple times the Astros scuffling this year, and they needed a big start from JV, and they got it, and they got back in the win column. So I think Fromber's going to have to be that guy that you count on when you're scuffling a little bit and you need your ace to pick you up and give you 7 or 8 innings and hopefully come out with a win. So, I'll fire it back to Charlie. Charlie, I think a lot is on Fromber here. To me, he's the key. He's the one that has to continue to take that role. And we saw it in the postseason this year. He was fantastic in the World Series. You don't win it without Fromber doing what he did in Game 2 and Game 6. How much is on Fromber to step up and be the man now?
Plenty. And then, of course, there's a trickle down in the rotation. To me, Christian Javier goes in as the clear number 2 because you cannot count on Lance McCullers to combine quality performance along with health. Then you have 2 starters who combined to win 20-some-odd games between them who couldn't even get in the rotation in the postseason this year, and Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy both are back. And then you have Hunter Brown banging hard on the door saying, hey, I'm ready to join the Major League rotation. The top 5 arms and the best bullpen in baseball are back. But look, there is zero chance the Astros are going to replace the 175 innings that Justin Verlander threw with the quality that Justin Verlander gave them over those innings, right? He won the Cy Young Award, and there was no trickery about it. He was a quintessential ace. As you note, after Astro losses, he was something like 11-1 with an ERA 1 point below something, right? He was 175 against everybody, even better than that when the Astros had him coming off of a defeat. But Page's turn. It's a little different in the starting rotation, except this team endured the loss of Garrett Cole, just as Verlander was about to go down and face Tommy John. I don't want to say the Astros are a turnkey operation, right? This is talent and player development, but their core remains so strong. The pitching depth remains excellent in the rotation. The bullpen is variability year to year, but it's not another bullpen in baseball you'd rather have going into 2023. Reality is the Mariners are coming. Right? They have strengthened their club this offseason, but it was a 16-game gap, right? Losing Verlander, subject to injuries and unexpected fall-off in performance, right? It can all go to hell in a handbasket, but that's unlikely. And the departure of Justin Verlander, right? If you go with a replacement-level pitcher, and the Astros have better than that, it's not going to be a 16-win difference for this ball club. So, unless the Mariners have one more big luxury splurge and add one of the non-Trey Turner shortstops, the Astros are going to be the favorite again in the American League West, but the gap has narrowed between the Astros and Mariners. Right, the Astros starting pitching depth, Seattle can go man for man now, basically as good as the Astros. But a Yogi Berra-ism, until you do it, you haven't done it. That really wasn't a Yogi-ism, but should have been. Right, the Astros, the power of incumbency, they're the team to beat, and they're still going to be a very, very tough out.
It's not a 16-game gap though, but in the postseason though, because you're looking at best of 5s and best of 7s. It was a 3-game gap between the Astros and Seattle this postseason. But anything can happen. I think one of the good things about this move is it keeps Justin Verlander out of the American League, and so you're not going to have to run into him in an Astros Yankees series. You're not going to run into him in a Mariners series or any of the other a White Sox series. Or whatever the case may be. So I think the fact that he goes to the Mets, and say what you want to about rivalries, but there's no rivalry there. He doesn't go to the Dodgers, so you don't feel like he went to the enemy. You just kind of feel like the Astros are so deep in pitching. We don't even know what Hunter Brown is yet, and that's what's going to make this really interesting. You said Javier is your second best pitcher. I agree with that. But we know Dusty. We know Dusty likes to err on the side of his vets. So we probably will see. I mean, McCullers take that number 2 in the rotation, at least to start off the year, and at least until such time in which McCullers proves he's not the number 2 guy. But I think as you look at this right now, and the Astros several times this season employed a 6-man rotation. You have a pretty solid 6-man rotation in Houston in the order that I think this may be: Fromber, McCullers, Javier, Garcia, Urquidy, Hunter Brown. So out of those 6 guys, you have a pretty decent rotation. What do you expect? I guess who do you expect to kind of make up? Kind of take steps forward this year. I mean, we saw Brown at the end of the year. Garcia and Urquidy we kind of buried in the postseason, but they'll get meaningful innings during the regular season because you need innings eaters. Do you think Hunter Brown takes that big step up to where you just are a well-oiled machine, like you said, turnkey, and you just keep on going?
You could plug in a 3.50 ERA for Hunter Brown, exactly double what Verlander gave the Astros in 2022. I think you take that. If he's healthy and earns 20 to 25 starts, right, 6 starters, that would be 27 per if they're all equal over 162 games. Hunter Brown has had some control issues in the minors. The stuff is beyond question. He obviously flashed brilliantly out of the Astros bullpen and fared well in a couple of starts, but that's not doing it over the long haul of a season at the major league level. Right, if Fromber just picks up where he left off, I mean, a guy with 6 innings plus every time out, set the record for quality consecutive starts within one season, a 2.48 ERA. That's number one stuff, if not quite Cy Young stuff. Javier was brilliant. His workload was light, right? He couldn't even get in the rotation to go every 5th day or every 6th day until the second half of the season. He is also the youngest of all these guys. The Astros, I think, will still be mindful and not think Javier's a 200-inning starter, but I don't even know his final inning count from last season. But if he jumps up to the 160, 170 range, that absolutely defrays some of the loss of Verlander. I think Urquidy, he's a classic number 4, number 5 starter, has solid stuff, but he's not a guy who's going to explode, win 18 games with an ERA of 2.23. Garcia was pretty average for about 2 months of last season. He, to me, is kind of the wild card. Does he take a leap forward and look like a bona fide number 2, number 3 type starter? Or is he kind of plateaued, which is fine, right? If he's your number 4 starter when you have 1, 2, and 3. But if you feel like you're dealing 3, 4 aces over the course of a series, someone is going to have to make that leap. And I'd say a little premature to ask that from Hunter Brown. I don't think Urquidy is of that talent level. So Garcia, I would hope, would be their best bet to blossom behind Valdez, Javier, and then you see how much quality work, quantity and quality you can get out of McCullers.
I think this could impact the bullpen, right? One of the great things about the year they had last year with the Astros bullpen is they didn't get overtaxed. Verlander is one of those guys that eats a lot of innings. Fromber does that too. Could we see a little bit of a ripple effect here with the bullpen where they're going to maybe get used more with some of these other guys just don't go as deep into games?
Yeah, and look, with relief pitchers, I mean, Ryan Presley's been a pretty dependable year in, year out guy for several seasons now. Rafael Montero got 3 years, $34.5 million because the sport is so flush with cash. There's always going to be sticker shock for us, right? Verlander's numbers at age 40. Trey Turner, 11 years, $300 million with the Phillies, so we see what Correa gets, et cetera, et cetera. Montero's had one good major league season. So did he unlock Fort Knox and he's going to be gold over these next 3 years? Or is there some whether regression to the mean, or he just had his career year and is going to fall back from that? Ryan Stanek, the bullpen was so damn good, really got mop-up work in the postseason, despite a 1.15 ERA. Well, he's probably not going to match 1.15 again. Brian Abreu, younger guy who was 0.66 ERA after the All-Star break. Postseason, 11 1/3 innings, 0.00. So they have depth in numbers. But simple math, if your starters are going shorter, your relievers are going to have to pick up more of the slack. And the other thing with the rotation, right, that you're down a cog, right? They had 6 starters plus Hunter Brown. Now it's 5 starters plus Hunter Brown. McCullers never stays healthy and pitches well over a full season. Fromber is a very easy motion. I'd say he's, I don't say a low effort guy, but it just looks free that he should hold up in terms of durability, but you never know. Right, if Javier's asked to throw 50, 60 more innings than he's ever thrown in a season before. Luis Garcia was healthy all last year. So was Urquidy, other than a little dead arm phase that shut him down for 2 weeks in the middle of the season. Are the Astros going to have the collective health along with performance that they got out of all of those guys? History says no, but it doesn't mean history is doomed to repeat itself.
Do you think, as you look at, Josh brought this up earlier, like Fromber, like the importance of Fromber stepping up and becoming the man in this rotation. Do you think there's going to be an impact at all because the rules change next year and there's no more shifting? Fromber's heavy ground ball picture, does that change his effectiveness any on the field?
Yeah, that is a great unknown. Fromber's a left-handed hitter, so lineups generally stack with right-handed hitters. The shift disproportionately discriminated against left-handed hitters. Right? There's the whole argument, well, they should have adjusted. Well, you can't defend or could not defend in the days of the shift, now past tense. You couldn't play right-handed hitters the way you play left-handed hitters unless that right-handed hitter was Albert Pujols or Martin Maldonado. Right? You can't play the shortstop 40 feet out left field and throw a guy out to first base on a grounder. Right, Altuve could set up as far out in right field as he wanted and still make plays on guys. Two-sided coin. Hey, Jordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker put me down to put 20, 25 points on their batting average if they're the exact same players that they were last year by not having screaming one-hoppers fielded halfway out in right field. But Fromber living by that ground ball and the Astros being about as shift intensive as anyone else, he would seem to be the most vulnerable to take a little bit of a hit since you can't load up one side of the infield anymore. Fromber, though, as a left-handed pitcher, has a natural edge in holding runners at first base. Another rule change. You can only throw over there twice unless you try a third time and pick the guy off. It's a balk. It's a free base. So pitchers who are quick to the plate or just have a naturally more deceptive motion, lefties have an edge in that area. So it's the great unknown, all of this stuff, right? The bases are actually going to be a little bit larger. So there's going to be an increased emphasis on the running game. I don't think like AstroTurf baseball in the 80s, but I think there's going to be, if not a surge, at least an uptick in base stealing attempts, and how you can handle that on the mound and behind the plate is going to have increased value in 2023 and going forward, unless they change the rules again.
I mean, couldn't they just left the baseballs juiced instead of doing all this, instead of fudging with the rules, you know?
Yuli Gurriel certainly hopes so. 31 home runs in 2019. A whole bunch of guys hit way more home runs in 2019 than they ever did before, ever did again. Yuli, since 2019, not 31 home runs in 3 years combined.
That's a good point. We saw Christian Javier, kind of the floater pitcher last year, where, some in the bullpen, some in the starting rotation. They were about to send him back kind of to a bullpen role until Verlander got hurt again. And then they're like, oh, crap, we got to keep Javier in the rotation. Can you envision a role similar to that for Hunter Brown this year?
Well, if you have 5 healthy starters, subject to how many off days there are at which stretches of the season, Hunter Brown is the swing guy, because you have 5 returning starters, all with credentials. You do not have a 39-year-old ace coming off Tommy John surgery that the Astros were very wise and cognizant of having Verlander typically go on 5 days rest or more. He only made 5 starts, I think it was, all season on the conventional normal pitcher's routine of 4 days rest. And there were often 6 days rest, occasionally 7 days rest. Then you get into a postseason schedule. Once per week is the way it will work out. So I think there's going to be a merit system on Hunter Brown. If he can force the Astros' hand to say, we can't just have this guy pitching 2 innings per week out of the bullpen, because they return their top 5 guys in Presley, Montero, Hector Neris, right, another guy who pushed Stanek back, Seth Martinez, right, didn't even get on the playoff roster. He showed very well in his opportunities. And if they want a lefty in their bullpen and don't make a play for a more established major leaguer, Blake Taylor doesn't excite. Blake Taylor dominated left-handed batters in 2021. So if they want now right-handed batters, dominated Blake Taylor. So there aren't going to be a whole bunch of innings for Hunter Brown in that bullpen unless you have injuries or fall off in performance. And in the end, if Hunter Brown is going to be a good major league starting pitcher, unless you're Mariano Rivera or someone close to of that caliber, there's much more value in a guy giving you 150 innings as a starter than there is 50 or 60 innings out of the pen.
It's interesting that, kind of as we've evolved, the game's evolved, and now the batter minimum on pitchers, relief pitchers, guys like Blake Taylor, there's just not really a place for them anymore in this game, just because, as a left-handed special, there's really no such thing, because you go in, you got to, face 3 batters. It's just, I think that's really interesting. I don't know that I love the 3 batter minimum rule. I think, we saw Tampa just ruined it for everyone, though, right? With the, this thing of let's bring out a different pitcher for every matchup that we like. And I mean, sometimes it takes one team to ruin it for everybody. It really seems like they did ruin it for everybody. Outside of the, those rules, the rules that are changing, we've got, you talked about the shift affecting Fromber as a pitcher. How does that affect, you mentioned Kyle Tucker, or you mentioned left-handed hitters, how it disproportionately penalized them. You've got a guy like Kyle Tucker and Jordan Alvarez in your lineup. That would seem to really favor those guys seeing, maybe a 10 or 20 point increase in their batting average this season, right?
No question. There's no question about that. And let's say a third left-handed hitter to be determined in the Astros lineup, whether it's a reunion with Michael Brantley or they get in on Andrew Benintendi. I don't think, but it's nice to be a billionaire. Jim Crane could reach into the discretionary income fund and say, you know what? The perfect fit out there is Brandon Nimmo. So if the Mets take Verlander from us, okay, we'll do 5 years, $100 million, and the Astros would add an ideal left-handed complement to Chas McCormick in center field, who's a career .375 on-base percentage guy. I mean, imagine a lineup, not that they're struggling now, but you add another high on-base guy, whether in front of or behind Altuve, before you get to Yordan and Bregman and Tucker and now Jose Abreu. So I think the Astros are probably going to add one more weapon offensively. And I don't think specifically because, no more shift, we have to get another left-handed bat in there. I just think it's going to fortuitously fall in that direction for them.
Yeah, I saw an article in the Chronicle about some starting pitchers for the Astros to look at if Verlander leaves. This came out a couple days ago. I don't see them signing any more starting pitchers. Do you, Charlie?
Well, James Click's not here, so Jake Odorizzi Part 2, a similar pitcher, probably won't be here. Now, the Astros are thin in starting pitching now in the minor league ranks. The Astros farm system overall is in the bottom third of the 30 big league franchises. Pitching close to the majors, there's really not much unless, wait a minute, that's not Forrest Whitley. So unless it was to finally happen for him that he's able to stay healthy and off the suspended list and pitch well for a couple months with the Space Cowboys. But you don't expect to make it through a major league season with only 6 starting pitchers, right? The war of attrition. So if they wanted to bring in someone who would be a swingman type, right? If they're thinking, all right, we want Hunter Brown in the rotation, and so that if and when McCullers goes down, we want that 6th starter. So if they would shop the value bin on that or someone that they're talk about all the losses that they've sustained without blinking an eye. Brent Strom, right? The Yoda of pitching. Brent Strom leaves and the Astros have their best pitching year in franchise history. So I think whether it's acting general manager Jim Crane or actual general manager Jim Crane for another little while here, they deserve every benefit of the doubt and then some that they're not going to make stupid decisions. And I don't mean that they haven't made their bad moves. Jeff Luhnow did. Certainly Click had a couple. But their batting average is better than everyone else in baseball. So let them take their cuts. And the roster that they have in the American League is probably going to be second to none again going into 2023. Because I'm sure you're going back to the World Series for a 3rd year in a row. Of course, not short series baseball and all that. But minus Justin Verlander, maybe the Astros project as merely a 96-win team instead of a 106-win club.
If last year was shortstop palooza during the offseason, I think this season seems to be outfield palooza. The Astros are in that market. We've mentioned a couple names here, Andrew Benintendi. Brian Reynolds hit the radar after reportedly asking to be traded from Pittsburgh. All signs are that the Pirates are asking for a king's ransom, as they should. Don't give away talent. But then there's also Brandon Nimmo. You brought him up. So you've got some guys out there. And then you also mentioned Michael Brantley as a possibility, which seems to fit kind of the more of the philosophy that the Astros tend to go to. But out of those names, Benintendi, Reynolds, and Nimmo, who's somebody who you think would be a real difference maker on this team?
I think Nimmo's the ideal fit, but he's going to come at the greatest financial cost. And while the Astros cut payroll in 2022, not that they were being miserly, right? Correa takes their offer and, well, the payroll wouldn't have been cut. But they have flexibility. I mean, they made an aggressive bid to bring in 36-year-old Jose Abreu at $19.5 million per and doing 3 years. But as Jim Crane said, look, the man has walked the walk. But when he bought the team and said, when the time is right, we're a top 5 to 10 revenue capable franchise and we'll spend at that level. And they've done that. So it doesn't mean it's linear that the payroll is going to go up every year or they're going to be in the top 6 in payroll every year. Right? They fell down close to 9 or 10 last year. Oh, it really set them back. So if Jim Crane, not I want to say as a luxury item, but just decides, okay, Altuve has 2 years left at $29 million per year. Bregman is 2 years left at $20 million per year. The way they space contracts out, right? Jordan just starts his extension, 6 years, $115 million. I mean, I'm not going to say Jordan is getting gypped there. He has generational financial security, but the Astros have to be just giddy that they have Jordan the next 6 years at what, a little over $19 million per year when, well, Jose Abreu just got that from the Astros. So Nimmo, if they just decide we're not going to go 5 years, $100 million plus for him. I don't know if the Astros have the prospect capital to land Brian Reynolds. The bidding on him would be very strong, a 27-year-old plus offensive center fielder, mixed reviews defensively, but certainly at least competent out there. Michael Conforto's had shoulder problems, didn't play at all in 2021. I just assume bring back Brantley for continuity, clubhouse guy. And of course, Yuli Gurriel's come up as well, kind of a utility role, could play some first base, defensive substitute for Abreu. The Astros probably wouldn't mind adding one younger piece, not necessarily as a key cog guy, but Brantley's slugging percentage has fallen off the 3 years in a row. Yuli was washed up in 2022 before a little revival in the postseason. Do you want to bring back a 39-year-old, or will be in June, Yuli, and a 36 years old as of May, Michael Brantley, both of them? So maybe one, and then you look for one move for someone younger. The names that we mentioned, Benintendi, Nimmo, one of the outfielders, because obviously Yuli is not an outfielder, and Brantley presumably would play very limited outfield. The DH pendulum would swing more Jordan and left with Brantley as the DH.
Yeah, I'd like to see Benintendi out of those guys. Just 28 years old. He's got, 5 seasons with over 126 games played. You know, you want guys that are going to be healthy, right? And you mentioned the age thing, Charlie. I love Uncle Mike as much as anybody, but if you bring him and Yuli back, and with Abreu being an older player, and, you know, you mentioned Altuve and Bregman, only 2 years left, I just worry this team could get old really fast. I'd like to see them add somebody like a Benintendi.
Runs end, errors end, dynasties end. You know, the Astros, I mean, they're not in a perilous phase because all their starting pitchers, they control them for at least 3 more years, every one of them. So that could be a nucleus, but it doesn't mean if your offense ages out that you can have a lousy offense with good pitching and be any elite team. So I'm sure they're mindful of that. And this is where over time, right, the loss of first and second round draft picks 2 years in a row obviously does damage to the farm system. While they haven't really traded away a prospect yet, Verlander deal, Cole deal, Greinke deal, that you're thinking, boy, we'd like to have that guy back now. Still, they no longer have the prospects who are hyped enough to be able to make the big swing trades that Luno was able to pull off so often. But honestly, I would say I wouldn't sweat those details. The Astros are framed for at least 2 more years to be pretty much a monster for the rest of Major League Baseball to deal with. And even when, you know, Altuve's 34 years old at the end of his contract, Bregman will be 30. You know, Jordan will still be in his late 20s. Kyle Tucker will still be in his late 20s. So you'll have different tent poles. And this is not Milwaukee. You know, this is not Kansas City. This is not Pittsburgh, where, okay, you build up Cincinnati, where we have that little era of 2, 3, maybe 4 years where we're getting in, expanded wild card, we can get in. But then we're going to have to cut payroll, rebuild our whole system. The Astros, we're not going to be looking, or we should not be looking at the early 2010s again, where you need to tear it down to the studs and then pry out the studs, right? Because their revenues, record levels 2022, they're going to break that again in 2023. And it's not like their payroll is what the Mets or Dodgers payroll is.
And I guess some of the more puzzling things that have come out from this hot stove has been, you know, kind of who's attached to who. Ken Rosenthal today says that the Astros are eyeing whatever this means, eyeing Benintendi. Like, I'm eyeing Benintendi. I mean, I see his name on Twitter, so I guess technically I'm eyeing him. But Benintendi, Brantley, Conforto, and then also they are interested in bringing back maybe Vasquez to share time with Martin Maldonado. Now, Vasquez did seem to take to a reduced role in the postseason. I think obviously he knew it was in his best interest too. He had been traded for, and he knew they had a real shot at winning a championship. One of the cooler moments I thought was after at the clinching last pitch, the last out of Game 6, instead of the catcher, pitcher moment where they're, celebrating to one another, Martin turns around to the dugout, and him and Vasquez, are celebrating and embrace. Kind of seemed like it was kind of a special moment of like those two, like, hey, Martin, like, we're going to do this and we're going to work together and you're going to get your time. Can you imagine a scenario in which one of the best catchers in the AL and Christian Vasquez would accept a reduced role in this? I mean, obviously we know Maldi's coming back with his contract vesting, so he's here, whatever that means, like whether he's in a reduced role or not. Does it even make sense to you that Vasquez would accept a reduced role or somewhat of a lesser role to be a catcher in the AL?
Reduced role, if the salary's not at a reduced level. Look, he's 32 years old himself. Has never made mega bucks, right? Relative Major League Baseball term. I think Vasquez goes where he gets his best offer. Right? He's probably going to look for a 3-year deal. How do the Astros look at that? Maldonado, I think he should be in his final year as at least a semi-regular, 36 years old. We know where the offense is. I know he's revered by the pitching staff, but it's gotten to the point where he's actually a little overhyped as a defender. Go look at the Astros numbers with Christian Vasquez, especially in the postseason. I think they gave up 1 run in the 33 innings he was behind the plate. When Verlander was getting shellacked in a couple of his postseason starts, was Maldonado dumb in those? The Vasquez is a better player. But Dusty Baker and the franchise, for all that Maldonado has delivered, but for Vasquez to extend his career, I don't think he should be looking to go somewhere where I'm going to get 120 starts. A job share makes sense. Vasquez really does not profile as a good enough guy to warrant designated hitter at bats. He finally got them with the Astros when Yuli went down and they had no other options. The very definition of Trey Mancini and Aledmys Diaz at the end of the World Series, no options there. So I think Vasquez, if Wilson Contreras comes to the Astros or goes wherever else and the Cubs are looking for a primary catcher and they say, hey, we'll give you a 3rd year. I think Vasquez, he has his ring. He had the experience. He had his Red Sox ring experience. I think he looks for the biggest contract of his career. And if it's offered in Tampa or Timbuktu, that's probably where he winds up.
The DeGrom signing over the weekend with the Rangers, Jeff Luhnow kind of tweeted out about that being a good signing. Brandon and I were talking about that earlier today. The Rangers, how much better have they gotten? Should the Astros fear them a little bit more than they did maybe a week ago?
Speculatively, the Rangers can be very interesting, but they have a lot of ifs. If DeGrom stays healthy, come on. He's 35 years old, 5 years, $185 million. Now, if the Rangers were really good and their thinking was, you know what, if we get 18 starts out of DeGrom, but he's healthy in October, we'll take that. And he can be worth $37 million per year. I'm going to say more desperate than stupid. The owners are so filthy rich. You're going to drop down $325 million on Corey Seager. Now, that was stupid. Another $175 million on Marcus Semien. I think 185 for DeGrom is more than a rounding error. But, if they get the Vanderbilt guys, Jack Leiter and then Kumar, if they develop and Martin Perez turns out he wakes up, the clock strikes midnight, and he's not the all-star he turned into out of nowhere at age 32 last season. They have the components of a really good team, but I think they have still so many holes in their lineup. The back end of their bullpen is nothing. And so you're going to have 2 rookie pitchers and a guy who's the most talented pitcher in baseball, but never stays healthy in Jacob DeGrom. At 35 years old, is he suddenly going to become a font of durability for them? So I understand why the Rangers did it, but I think the Mariners might be closer to the Astros now than the Rangers are even to the Mariners. And Rangers can keep throwing money at mediocre pitchers, and they're still going nowhere.
That goes back to your prove it standpoint, which is at some point, you have to prove that and I say the same. I have a kind of the same thing when I talk about it's in baseball. It's a lot about like trajectory of a franchise. And there's just something about momentum from season to season. I know you're not a big momentum guy, but I just mean that it is that the teams that have proved it continue to prove it. And the teams that don't live up to the height often continue to not live up to the height. But I did see something. Garrett Cole makes $36 million a year and is the third highest paid pitcher in New York. So that is that's interesting little tidbit there.
If Cole, with what's left on his contract, were a free agent now, would he top 6 years, $216 million? And that's what he has left with the Yankees. So one way to frame it. But the Yankees, until they regenerate some talent in their pipeline, they have these two hotshot stud kid shortstop prospects. Potential. One definition of potential, I say from time to time, one definition of potential is everything you thus far have failed to accomplish. Now, youth, lack of opportunity. Aaron Judge, the Yankees re-sign him. Good for them. Great for Aaron Judge. Well, they're still 0 for forever against the Astros in the postseason. That doesn't make their team any better, keeping Aaron Judge. What else would they have done to make their team better, to close the gap or better enable them to beat the Astros in a playoff series? So, look, the best organizations in baseball right now are Astros 1, Dodgers 2. I would take Atlanta Braves 3. The way the Braves produce young talent, and they've locked up so much of it, and nothing lasts forever. But the Astros are now into the second half of a decade's worth of excellence. And the question is, can they make it a whole decade worth? Decades worth, because they're at 6 and counting. And I'd make book on it. It goes for at least 2 more years.
Well, and I don't think it's just, you mentioned Aaron Judge, so we're going to finish this thought out. But so the thing with Judge is, okay, the Yankees sign him. That also takes a big chunk of their available payroll away. And I know the Yankees are the Yankees, but they don't spend like the George Steinbrenner Yankees, where they're just, to hell with, whatever taxes or whatever we're just going to spend. This is not the same team. So when you have as much payroll dedicated to so few pitchers, it seems like that's plays well into Houston's favor as far as being able to continue to at least dominate that team in the AL, but just dominating the AL in general, because you still have to see what the Mariners are going to do and kind of how they progress and evolve. But if the Yankees come back with the same team, you're not afraid of this team running it back with the players as is. I mean, maybe if they get a Carlos Correa or something like that, maybe they look a little bit scarier, but that would almost preclude them, I would think, from being in the Carlos Correa sweepstakes if they go some massive 9-year deal with Aaron Judge. Unless
they decide otherwise.
Right.
And of course, if the old man, late George M. Steinbrenner III, was able to speak with the kid, he'd say, what are you doing? What are you doing? We're still you're cutting into our profit margin, but we haven't been to a World Series since 2009. The last time the Yankees won it was when they made the mega splurges on CC Sabathia, Mark Teixeira, and I think there was a third big dollar player I'm vaporing out on right now. They're the Yankees. They are the cash richest franchise in Major League Baseball. But throwing bad money after good money or bad money doesn't guarantee you a payoff. Seattle Mariners won 116 games in 2001 and didn't even make the World Series. Right? The Dodgers, they're a dynasty in their own way, but they've only won 1 World Series while winning, 9 divisions in 10 years, 8 divisions in 9 years, whatever it is. A little like March Madness. You can have an awesome regular season, but if you flame out in the Sweet 16, everyone thinks you had a bad year. So the Dodgers are starting to fight a little bit now. So did the Dodgers say, okay, we'll offer it up to Aaron Judge, and if he takes it, great. Right? They met with Verlander the other day. Did they say, we're not paying $1 over $42 million per year? And then Cohen with the Mets says, well, here's 43.33. But here's another way to the Astros in terms their foundation remains just bedrock solid for 2025. Depth matters and all that, but 2025. What franchise would have 5 players to say, okay, here's what we're starting with, and the rest we'll figure it out? Tucker, Yordan, Framber, Javier, and whoever we would judge number 5. Right, Bregman would be 30, but his contract's up, so is he here in 2025? And that's why the Astros have had the longevity of excellence they're in the midst of now, and why they essentially have not batted an eye. Right, Keuchel, Morton, Cole, Springer, Correa, and there basically has been no deterioration. Now, it can't go on forever that way, but you can make a run at a good while longer when you have Yordan for 6 more years, Kyle Tucker controlled for 3 more years. Who knows when and if an extension comes into play for him. But the depth that they have in their pitching and the wherewithal to go out and get more, not a per se replacement for Justin Verlander, but they can go into next season and McCullers breaks down again and/or Hunter Brown's not ready. You can adapt along the way during the season and go try to make a trade, whoever the GM is at that point. So, if 2023 was starting, I guess we should at least give it to the end of these winter meetings. But the Astros going to be on everyone's list of the top 5 teams with the best chance to win the World Series. And that's the whole point. Get there, win your division, avoid the 2 out of 3 in the first round by having one of the 2 best division records. That's the best possible shot you can have to win the World Series. And the Astros have now done it twice, once under this format. And, they're going to be the morning line favorite to win yet another American League West. And that gives you, it can be disappointment, but it's not failure if you don't win the World Series. Right? 2021, 2019, disappointments. They didn't choke. They lost. Right? The Nationals won the 2 games here. The Braves, frankly, were just a better team at that point. If you're getting to the World Series and giving yourself a chance, and the Astros are doing it every year at a level that we typically do not see in Major League Baseball anymore.
Well, with that in mind, you mentioned dynasty with the Dodgers. Verlander, they asked him after this World Series, what's a word to sum it up? He said dynasty. Let's revisit it. They've won their 2nd World Series this time, Charlie. Is it a dynasty or do they have to get one more?
No, I think there's no question about it. Going to 4 World Series in 6 years, I'll again go with college basketball. You go to 4 Final Fours in 6 years and win the national championship twice. Obviously, a player turnover is much different in college basketball. But yeah, this is a dynasty. There are different ways to measure dynasties. Not all dynasties are created equal. So is this Astros dynasty as good as the Oakland A's in the early 70s? Well, no. They won 5 straight divisions, 3 straight World Series. But since then, other than the Yankees, who won it in 98, 99, 2000, after 96, 4 and 5 years. Well, no one's won 2 in a row since. So the idea that you have to go back-to-back winning the World Series to be a dynasty? No, if you're the better part of a decade as a dominant force that year in, year out, teams are thinking, oh, geez, we're going to have a hell of a time beating them. So I think it's, look, the elephant that will never leave the room, the cheating, 2017, et cetera. But in terms of the results, the Astros absolutely qualify as a dynasty. There's no coherent argument against it at this point.
Well, I guess coherent is the key word because there's a lot of those arguments happen on Twitter. But I think I think that's what makes 22's championship so special is because I think it is a validation of what came before it in a lot of regards because of what you mentioned that went on in 2017. Because even if they won it in 2019, you still see that sort of suspicion come out of New York of like, oh, well, I mean, there was the whole buzzer thing, so there's that sort of, QAnon level kind of conspiratorial conversation that happens in regards to, Altuve in that situation. But I think this is one of those where so now with everything, all the cards on the table, because that came to light, that scandal came to light after the end of the postseason in 2019 and going into early 2020. So now with all the cards on the table and everything out there, I think this was super meaningful in making a statement in the legitimacy of those championships. We've even seen the media really change their narratives on this. We've seen a lot. And I think there's something to that. I think it's not just about what the Astros accomplished in this postseason, this past postseason. It was about how they did it, which was to sweep the first 2 series. And so here it's like 2017, they go, oh, well, they were cheating and it took them 7 games to beat us. Right. Okay. Cool. 2019, not doing the trash can thing anymore, the whistling, bounced you in 6. Now, 2022, with all the cards on the table and all that, the past shenanigans exposed, a sweep. So there's, and this was a team that was on New York's radar all year. They knew Houston would be there at the end. Houston had a pretty good idea it was going to be the Yankees. Those two had set themselves apart in the AL. And I think it's a pretty cool story, at least from a Houston perspective, of you get back there and not only do you handle your business, but you do it so in such a convincing manner that the New York media and fans look at their team and go, we're not in the same category. We're not in the same league as what, cool. 52 home runs. Great. 100, well, I guess 99 wins, but they were on course for 120 wins. Who cares if you get there and you're getting thumped by the same team every year? That's why I think, especially wrapped up in that conversation about who is and who isn't a dynasty and whether Houston belongs in that conversation, I think that's a pretty cool, gratifying moment for this team, was to silence the doubters in a very, very convincing fashion. Not only the sweeps, but to go into a red hot Phillies, home field and to silence their bats, not only with a great pitching performance, but the ultimate pitching performance, one of the two best pitching performances in World Series history.
Went down 2-1 in the World Series at that point. I guess it qualified for having gone viral. Martin Maldonado summed it up beautifully after the ALCS. Right? They wanted Houston, they got Houston. And if not quite a mantra, what are they going to say now? What can they say about us now? It is part of the permanent record and all that. And it's not that winning in 2022, that's atonement for past sins. They were the best team in the league by a wide margin. You have the Dodgers regular season record. They didn't even get to the World Series. Typically in this era of baseball, it's only about 1 every 4 years that the team that has the best record over 162 games winds up winning the World Series, just because there's a roulette nature of postseason baseball. So the Astros, they don't check that box. They didn't have the best record for the season. But at the end, I don't think anyone was seriously questioning, did the best team in baseball this year wind up winning the World Series? And so that, too, is part of the permanent record.
Yep. One final thing for me, Charlie. The Astros rotation now, no Verlander. Where do they stack up in the AL?
Can I add something just for context to this? Because this was going to be something I wanted to talk about, too. I saw this on let's see if I can bring this. I want to cut everybody up here, but I don't know if you can see this or not. Codify says the best 2023 starting rotations as of right now. Mets
National League.
Yeah, the Astros aren't even on the top 6 here. What kind of garbage is this? I don't know. What? Yeah, it kind of combined into Josh's question, but certainly if you go by that, the Astros are flying under the radar. But yeah, where do they stack up now?
I mean, Garrett Cole's really good and all that. His ERA's been over 3 the last 2 years. And I'm not mocking him for having an ERA of 3.43 when you're a 200-inning starter. But Framber was 2.48. Christian Javier in the rotation was well below 3. Are they counting Luis Severino to be healthy and really good all year for the Yankees? That's a worse bet than McCullers for the Astros on that one. Do we know from where Codify hails?
I'm not familiar with him. No.
Who? I don't know. The Yankees signing Kodai Senga and trading for Shohei Ohtani. No, I don't. And that was updated, obviously, the loss of Verlander. And you know what part of that is? Wishful thinking. Yeah. Was it that, the walls are going to start tumbling down in Jericho and Houston. But that now the Rays have an interesting collection, and you throw in the way they use the openers. But Tyler Glasnow, they're counting on him. He missed most of the last season with Tommy John. I don't think right now there's a rotation that you'd say I'd take that over the Astros, starting with as a 1-2 punch. Javier's not done it yet for a full season. Well, Framber now has pretty much for 2. So yeah, I'm gonna revert to wishful thinking if you're thinking the Yankees starting rotation right now is better than the Astros starting rotation, minus Verlander. Does Codify know it's the Mets who got Verlander and not the Yankees? He signed with New York. We're finally going to get the Mets got him.
And I guess I should. I'm new to this podcasting thing, so I guess I should have read that aloud, because for those that are listening to the podcast, which we will be available on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, all those other good places, Odyssey. But for those who are listening, it's Codify tweeted out best 2023 starting rotations. They have Mets, Brewers, Braves, Yankees, Rays, and Phillies. Just if you're listening, Charlie. One last thing, just we talked about outfield Palooza, infield Palooza is part of that. Was kind of solidified earlier today with Trey Turner going to the Phillies. This was obviously the Astros World Series foe that they vanquished in 6. If you have Trey Turner on this team, how different does that World Series play out?
In a short series, I'm going to say that if Trey Turner is there, it makes the difference. I mean, the Dodgers had him and didn't even get to the World Series. But he's a substantial upgrade. Right? Gene Segura had a couple of nice playoff moments, but he's out. They'll move the young guy Bryson Stott from short to second. Bryson Stott offensively is terrible. 11 years for Turner is ridiculous. He's 29 years old. Not very many 39 and 40-year-old live shortstops. Right? Speed is a big part of Turner's game. He's a terrific player and the best slider I've ever seen. But that must be amortization and the way they can calculate the contract in terms of the luxury tax, spreading it out over 11 years. They have to be thinking it's sunk cost on the back end of that. But it's a great get for the Phillies, who are spending as if Major League Baseball is going to end in the next 2-3 years. And you know what? Good for them. They got a taste. First time in 10 years getting to the postseason. Dave Dombrowski, their general manager. I'm not going to say he's blind to the future, but he lives in the present. They extended him for 3 years, so I'm sure they're going to continue to be very aggressive. In terms of their rotation being better than the Astros, I think they were 6th on that list. Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola is a real stout 1-2. Would you take them over Framber and Javier? I don't know. Oh, maybe Nestor Cortez is going to win 30 next year for the Yankees, and that's why Codify likes that Yankees rotation. Frankie Montas' arm is going to reattach. Domingo Germán will stay off the suspended list. There's no way you're taking the Yankees rotation right now over the Astros rotation. Anyway, I digressed or regressed.
Indeed. Oh, well, so one of the things I wanted to do on this podcast to kind of cap it off at the end was something that we would call the bottom line, which was kind of derived from our or on theme with our Stone Cold Stros name here. So the bottom line, I want to get your guys' opinion just on the way out the door. What do you guys think? Should the Astros retire the number 35 in honor of Justin Verlander's tenure in Houston?
No, just not long enough. Now, of course, he didn't go to Sterling High School and the University of Houston. The Rockets retired Clyde's number. He was here 3.5 years, won a championship. Yeah. Well, Verlander pitched 3 full seasons plus a month in a postseason and 2 World Series titles and 2 Cy Young Awards and a runner-up. But he was amazing, but I still don't think there's quite the breadth there. Look, not to go morbid on this, but if he had a tragic demise and end of his career now, yeah. And I'm not begrudging him at all and taking the Mets money and going to New York and testing himself on the brightest lights of Broadway and so forth. But at least my visceral reaction is no, I'm not retiring Justin Verlander's number.
No, I'm with Charlie there. Yeah, I'm with Charlie. And part of it's going to be Jim Crane, right? And it looks like, Justin took the money, and that's okay. Everybody has to make that choice. But that's the thing Jim Crane said about, Carlos Correa is if guys want to be here, then, they'll take the contracts that we offer. If they don't, they don't. And Justin decided to take off. So, unless like what Charlie says, something happens, knock on wood to his arm or something like that, he's not able to pitch much more after this, then no, I don't think they retire it.
But what an amazing and privileged stretch for us to all take in.
Yeah.
If at any point after Roger Clemens left the Astros, you tell me that there'd be a guy who pitched 3+ seasons with the Astros and accomplished more, and undoubtedly accomplished more than Clemens did while he was here for that incredible run, I'd have said, yeah, I'm going to bet the under on that. Well, I'd have lost, because 2 Cy Young awards, a second-place finish, throw in becoming the 6th guy ever to throw at least 3 no-hitters, 2 World Series championships. But I'm still not retiring.
And that's going to be the bottom line. And I'm going to leave the final word to Charlie Palolo. Charlie, thank you so much. Josh, thank you so much. Everyone who's been commenting, thank you so much. Everyone who joined us for this first live inaugural episode of Stone Cold Stros. We're going to do this every week, Mondays, 3 p.m. live, and then they will roll out to all of the on-demand platforms after that. Like I said, look for us on Apple and Spotify. We're already on a lot of those right now. So if you want to go re-listen to the show, you can go do that. But thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, thanks for having this conversation with us. Everybody, have a great week, and go Stros.